there was no longer any hope of attracting enough traffic. Unlike the passing of a great shipyard, always terrible and catastrophic, all that might be said of the last Renfrew chain ferry is that she was hopelessly uneconomic and underused, and few jobs will be lost. However, for the handful of men who do work her, and have done so more or less since she was commissioned in 1952, it's very sad to be preparing for the final crossing.
There's your fare 160. That's the last fare I suppose I'll be giving on this shift here.
That's true. It's
known you for a long time on here. What are you going to do after this?
We'll have to go the long way round. Add a few miles a minute onto the day.
This diesel-electric chain ferry is the last remnant of a way of life that's vanished. For men like Robert Scottson, the Clyde is a very much quieter place than it was when he started working on the ferry 28 years ago. And he vividly recalls the thousands of workers who once travelled on her.
We used to have a crowd here on a Saturday night.
And the ferry master that was appointed by the borough of Renfrew when they took over the running of it was my grandfather.
A really long family connection?
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
He was a sawyer to trade, and he was, his wage was 24 shillings a week, and he had the use of the ferry house in the North Bank.
What's your earliest memory of the ferry?
Well, it's a faint memory. When I was sent over to Blort Hill Hospital with an infectious disease, it was Dr. Goldie Stevens who sent me over. I'd only be about 5-year-old at the time, and what sticks in my mind was I was taken over in a horse-drawn ambulance, and it was the swinging of the trams that stuck in my mind. There's nothing else sort of registered, you know, that's what it was.
Well, George, I don't suppose your memories go that far back.
No, not quite. But I do recall that I always knew when the ferry had broken down, and I was always glad of it because my father was one of the men who worked to repair the chains in the ferry, and when it broke down he was working all night, which meant an extra bag of sweeties the following week, which was most welcome.
How much will it be missed?
I think it'll be missed a great deal by Renfrew people and Yoker people. It's an old faithful friend it's one of the landmarks of the area, and I think it's going to be one of these situations where you don't realise how much you're going to miss her until she actually goes. And although the new vehicles that are ships that come on will certainly provide an adequate service, I'm sure, this is an old friend to the people of Yoker and Renfrew, and she'll be sadly missed by many.
Historically, what do you think its greatest moment was? I suppose it might have been what it did during the Clydebank Blitz. Would you agree with that?
Well, certainly it was one of the most prominent events where she ferried back and forward all night the emergency vehicles to deal with the fires and the injured during the Clydebank Blitz. Also during the launching of the Queen Mary, on that particular occasion she ferried something like 22,000 passengers across the river and 1,000 vehicles. So that was quite a day for her as well.
Yeah, what's difficult to remember is that this river at one point, I mean not so very long ago, really would have been chock-a-block.
Oh, very much so, very much so. The amount of shipping at that time was tremendous, and all along the river you had the shipbuilding yards and ships going up, the granary, and tremendous amount of traffic. You only have to look at some of the old photographs, films, to see just how busy she was.
George, has there not always been a great rivalry between Renfrew and Yoker about what the ferry should actually be called?
Well, I have seen some old postcards saying Yoker Ferry in the bottom, but when you look at the picture it says Renfrew on the ferry. I think she'll be fondly remembered by both people on both sides of the bank.
Nostalgia everywhere. We'll be rejoining the fun at the ferry a little later, when we'll have a song from Alistair MacDonald, who's been around this...
Liners and steamers galore that sail the world o'er frae Scotland's fair shore. But if it's a free sail you want, then you must get on a wee ferry run by the Clyde Trust. They're no very handsome and streamlines they lack. They're the same at the front as they are at the back. But if you want pleasure, then you canny wheel hide. Just take a wee ferry that crosses the Clyde. They've got a black funnel, the colour o' the fleet, and their crews are the finest old salt you could meet. They're clever wee boats, you can bet your last pound. They go backwards and forwards without turning round. There's no first-class cabin nor dining saloon like you get on the steamer that sails to Dunoon. But if you want o'er the river sea wide, just take a wee ferry that crosses the Clyde. They dug a big tunnel wi' Dunnet White Inch, but it's never the same as the ferry to Winch. You'll no see the big boats as they're sailing by, nor hug your wee bird as you gaze at the sky. You'll no see the swing parks where the children are playing, the gantries and cranaries o' Fairfield's big crane. They're clever wee boats, you can bet your last pound. They go backwards and forwards without turning round. The sea is the place for romance, so they say, but the ferry has always had its part to play. For many a man and his bonny wee bride first met on a ferry that crosses the Clyde. So let's all remember that famous decree that said the wee ferries in Glasgow were free. And here's to the Clyde Trust and the day they decided to sail the wee ferry that crosses the Clyde. To sail the wee ferry that crosses the Clyde.